Hey, CJN podcast listeners, Michael Freeman here, executive producer. I wanted to share that the CJN has earned 6 Simon Rock Hour Awards this month, the Jewish Pulitzers, as some folks call them. We took home awards for magazine writing and design, and for feature stories on a Holocaust music project, BDS on Canadian campuses, and 4 women who discovered they were sisters in their golden years, thanks to 23andMe. But we can't create award-winning journalism without your help. If you value independent Jewish journalism, please consider supporting us today at thecjn.ca/donate.
It's not Winnipeg. This is talking about much smaller than Winnipeg.
Well, that was kind of my first question off the top, is just like, what is small? Like, what are the degrees?
I also think everyone sees themselves as, like, I think the Toronto people see themselves as small compared to New York.
Yes, I think that's true.
But that's phony silliness, though. That's silliness.
Yeah.
We're small compared to New York.
Oh, I like that. That's got to go in there somewhere.
Come on. Oh, like, give me a break.
The Jewish Federation of Vancouver has recently chosen to rebrand itself to the Jewish Federation of British Columbia. This is to recognize that they serve many smaller Jewish communities around BC, and in the hopes that they will empower this rapidly growing sector of Jewish life. So in light of this, we decided to take the time today to discuss the nature of Jewish life in smaller communities, the value they provide to the fabric of Canadian Jewry, and of course the challenges that can come with living outside of major metropolitan areas. I'm Avi Feingold, and along with Yedida Eisenstadt and Matthew Leibel, we are Not in Heaven. Hello, everybody.
What's up?
Hi, Avi. Hi, Matthew.
Hello.
Hi, team. Yedida, Avi. Yeah. I feel like if we did that every week, it would be like this ridiculous little combination. Yedida, Avi, Matthew, Yedida. That could be our new...
Sure. Or we could not.
How are you guys?
The kids are finishing school, sort of. It's been we're not really working and doing learning anymore. We have lots of activities and parties and like end of school fun. So my daughter had something yesterday called Yes Day, which all the kids thought that they could wear their pajamas to school, but apparently that was not what the school thought. So there was some confusion on that front. And yesterday also, my twins graduated preschool, which was super cute, in their little suits. And
did they have a thing? Did they have a...
Yeah, the school had a graduation ceremony for them.
Gosh.
It was really cute.
Oh.
They did not wear their caps, but they did have little sashes that said graduate 2026, and we celebrated them and we brought them flowers, and it was very cute.
Oh, I love that.
My daughter's 8th grade graduation was last week, and the sweetest thing was that at some point in the middle of the ceremony, they all walked down from the stage and somebody announced that we want to thank the people that made our whatever years and years at Hillel Torah, you know, what it was. And they went and each kid brought a flower to their parents.
That's nice.
And then they went back and it was like a really cute moment.
It's cool. You know, it's cool. The end of preschool for one of ours as well, and the end of grade 1 for one of ours. So, wild times. Everybody keeps getting older. It's weird. I want to ask you guys a question about getting older.
Sure.
Oh boy.
Okay, I had this. This is an existential question for the rabbis. When you're young and you go out, I don't know what it's like because you guys grew up in big cities, but I grew up in Winnipeg and I lived in Halifax a little bit. But it seemed to me when we were going out, the idea of whether we'd find a place to park or not factored in not at all when we were young to the decision of where we would go, right? Where are we going to park? We'll park, we'll walk, it'll be fine. We'll walk for days. Who cares? We'll take our car. It'll be fine. Now, you know, like my dad was celebrating a birthday recently. We were pitching some ideas of where to go. And we said, like, let's go to this great restaurant downtown. And he said, there's nowhere to park. I can't go. I don't even want to try. And I posit this question to you. At what age does parking go from being not a factor at all to being the biggest concern and fundamental question about whether you'll go out?
I don't think this is exactly what you're referring to, but I can tell you that I have a 16-year-old child who bases where she will go as to whether or not there is a parking lot because she refuses to parallel park because she's a
just
wuss.
learning.
And she's been driving for a year almost, but she refuses to parallel park. And I'm like, oh, you children.
I think this,
that's
Matthew,
different.
might be a generational thing with my parents, because I think for my parents also always, it hasn't been about how old they are, that parking has always been a factor.
Even when they were young, you think? Like, even when they were young people, I'm sure there was a time in their lives where they just didn't think about the parking. You think they were...
I don't think so. I think they've always thought about parking, and they're listening. And in the person that I married does not consider it at all. And we will go where we want to go. And somehow or another, it may take an act of God, but there will somehow be parking. And
it's amazing the number of
in-between.
bits. Like in Seinfeld and Mrs. Maisel, Jews and parking, it is just like, and I had this moment where my dad said, we will not go there. There's no parking. And I had this just like epiphany with, at what age? Because I'm beginning to relate to like, yeah, that's a bit of a schlep, and I don't have the time in my life to deal with a schlep right now. I've gotten old somehow. I'm 41. Like, give me a break, Matt.
I feel like I went through stages where when I was young, but on a Saturday night, like it wasn't easy to find a spot, but you'd find a spot, like it would be available, to realizing at some point in my life that paying for a parking lot was actually worth it because you were saving 20 minutes of your life and circling and all of the stress of looking for said spot.
Also, like the answer to this, like the crux to opening up the question, may be like whether or not you've ever lived in New York City. Because if you've ever lived in New York City with a car, parking everywhere else is like a non-issue.
You guys are experts in older times, Middle Ages, ancient stuff. Like, I go to you guys as my scholars.
Sorry, I thought you were saying that we are middle-aged and ancient stuff, but that's not
we're all kind of the same
got it.
age. No.
Yeah.
But you know more about those times. What was the equivalent of parking concerns?
My understanding is that for hundreds of years in big cities, horses and what they excreted was a significant problem that affected everybody's day-to-day life.
I'm not joking with this question. I'm just laughing because it's a funny question. But I really want to know the answer here. Like, what about for the Israelites? Like, what was the thing? I mean, they had animals. They had space. Half the Torah is talking about where they sat and where they camped and all of this. That's all parking. Like the Torah talks about parking.
You're saying that you think there was a traffic jam because some guys like could never put their tent. They could never put their tent together in time, and everybody's waiting. But Shmulik in the back there is like still struggling with the poles.
My point is that if pop culture reveals that parking has been a discussion for our people for at least a century since there have been cars, then you take a bigger look and you realize in the Torah, they're just like, you guys have to sit over here and you guys have to sit over here. It's because they were fighting over spots. Like, where are we going to go parking? This ultimate dilemma.
Speaking of getting old and decrepit, I had an ancient technique yesterday done to me, which was, oh my God. Do you guys know what
ancient technique?
Yes. Do you guys know what cupping is?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So I have these massive welts on my back now because my physical therapist decided to do cupping, which then reminded me of a great Yiddish saying that my dad used to say. Like whenever I would, something would happen, it would be useless. And he would say, "Sis gehelfen von a teuten Bankes," which translates to, great. This is as useful as cupping a dead person. Right, because
what? They
used to think that if cupping was the cure-all for everything, but you can't. If you cupped a dead person, they're not coming back to life. So
sure,
"Sis gehelfen von a teuten Bankes."
Don't put that. Jews did this a long time ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Don't put that like line on your storefront in Montreal because you may get in trouble with the Office de la Langue Française. I don't know if you heard about this. The Arthur's Nosh Bar, which is a famous Jewish but not kosher certified deli brunch place in Montreal, got in trouble because they had nosh on their window on their storefront, and that's not a French language thing, and it needs to have more prominent French. And every restaurant in Montreal has come to their rescue and has started putting nosh on their front windows. no matter if they're like Jewish or not.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
cool.
Way to go, Office de la Langue Française, for reminding the entire city that a good nosh is a useful thing to have. Let's move on to our main topic. Recently, the Jewish Federation of Vancouver had a summit of all the Jews across BC in Whistler, BC, and part of that summit was to talk about the smaller communities and the way in which British Columbia actually functions as a community on its own, and that there were communities that were independent and were doing their own thing, but they decided to rebrand themselves and rename and call themselves the Jewish Federation of British Columbia, to recognize that Vancouver, even though they were serving these outlying communities, they didn't want to be the be-all and end-all, and to recognize that there was a lot of Jewish communities, and some of them that were doing their own thing and needed the support, and were happy to get the support from the Federation. It's interesting how historically Jews moved to small towns all the time. We had plenty of Jews across the prairies and small communities. There were Jews across Eastern Canada. When I visited Nova Scotia on our honeymoon, I got to see the shul in Glace Bay. And the guy who ran the dry goods store on the main street was so happy to see a Jewish guy walk in with his kippah, and ran over and got the keys and showed me the whole shul, and it was beautiful. Like, people were in small communities, and what may have been a trend for years of Jews deciding that they needed to move to the big city in order to be Jews, now we start seeing that those trends are starting to get reversed, and smaller Jewish communities are actually increasing at faster rates than everybody else. So I guess it was a time, and I really want to use this opportunity to talk about the nature of the communities that we have in Canada that are outside of Montreal and Toronto, and the difference between living in a major metropolitan Jewish community versus living in a smaller one. What is the value of these things? Karen Collins, who runs the Hartman Institute in Canada, wrote a piece recently about the middle powers, as she called them, based on Carney's middle power speech, and saying that these smaller communities are actually the value and the heart of Canadian Jewry, and that we should look towards them for a lot of different lessons. And she promoted a lot of these lessons. Matthew, you are our resident smaller town, despite the fact that Winnipeg has a federation and has a real Jewish community for many, many years. It is not Montreal, it's not Toronto, it's not New York, it's not Chicago.
God forbid.
What do you see? You've lived in Winnipeg pretty much your whole life, but
I'll do the quick rundown. I'll remind everybody, right?
Go ahead.
I'm born and raised in Winnipeg. Went through Jewish public school system, didn't attend the camps, but all my friends did. My sister was super involved at one of the two camps, and same thing with BBYO. But I lived in Halifax for a bunch of years, 07, 08, 09, and I worked at both of the shuls in Halifax. Well, that was when I was in journalism school, and then after I worked for the Atlantic Jewish Council. This story reminds me of what they had, right? So the Jewish Federation that's based in Halifax is not the Federation of Halifax. It's the Federation of Halifax and... shout out to Glace Bay, Cape Breton, everything you mentioned, PEI, Newfoundland, the small community in St. John's, and then your New Brunswick, 3, right? Fredericton you mentioned, but also Moncton. Mm-hmm. So I've been to the shul in Fredericton, I've been to the shul in Moncton, and St. John, right? So
Sydney has a shul also.
Yeah, sorry, when I said Cape Breton, like Glace Bay, Sydney, like those are the two spots up in Cape Breton. So this reminds me a lot of that, but also the last couple of years, I think I've told you, I've been spending 2 Shabbatons a year in Kelowna, which straight up is in BC and is part of this whole thing. And I know the person who is I think they call them the community connector. That's one of the people I work with when I go to Kelowna and deal with that community and that shul. And we can talk about Kelowna as well. So, I mean, I'm a small town guy for sure. But when we get into this conversation, when you say not Toronto and Montreal, that is a scale. Like, if you're a Jew right now in Sydney, Nova Scotia, if you're a Jew in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Kelowna, BC, Winnipeg, Manitoba, what's the question? Like, where is it, quote unquote, easiest to be a Jew?
No,
is that kind of the question?
What do you think Jews get wrong when they're coming from the big city and thinking that Winnipeg is this nothing town and we have nothing, and you probably have.
Is that what people think?
I don't know. It's a straw man. It's probably not true. But look, what is Jewish life like in Winnipeg, and what is Jewish life like in Kelowna or Halifax? These are different scales.
And
Right.
also, like, how many Jews are in Winnipeg?
I think the number that they kind of throw around is 15,000. It's always tough because people don't always necessarily arrive in places and like, call somebody and say new Jew in town, right?
I've arrived. Yeah.
Right. Like it takes a while for the census, especially when you have waves of immigration from in Winnipeg, Argentina in the 90s and early 2000s. And then more lately, Israel, Russian Israelis. To me, this whole conversation is about access to Jewish infrastructure. Right? The reason why life in a smaller community, the smaller the community gets, like if we're going to just be overly simplistic, the fewer people there are, the less money there is, the less ability there is to fund and create infrastructure. And infrastructure has kind of been a calling card of the Jews for thousands of years. I mean, we've been building schools. Start with schools. Like in Kelowna, there's no Jewish school. In Edmonton, there's a Jewish school that goes until the end of grade 6. In Calgary, there's this Jewish school that goes until the end of, I think, grade 8. Don't quote me. I should find out before I say. Or Vancouver. In Winnipeg, there's a Jewish school that goes to the end of grade 12. So
but Winnipeg is a big community.
15,000, right?
It's not
So,
Toronto. It's not New York. But 15,000 Jews is a critical mass of Jews. And even
It
if
is.
it was much bigger once upon a time, the infrastructure exists. I think there's a few different kinds of small communities that these studies are talking about. There's the small communities that used to be much bigger, right? And like earlier, Avi was talking about like migration to the bigger population centers from the smaller Jewish population centers. But I think that there's also a thing that's happening that Jews are moving to places where historically there were not established Jewish communities. And so there isn't an old cemetery. There isn't an old shul or
Kelowna's a
in some
perfect
places,
example
yes,
of that.
In some
Yeah.
places, no, and all different kinds of infrastructure.
Right. Like I know people who can tell me stories about being a Jew in Moose Jaw, and being a Jew in Medicine Hat. Mm-hmm. Right now, there might be one family, probably no families. Right, but once upon a time, there was a synagogue, and there was a community built around probably the synagogue. And one of the guys in town ran a store, and maybe somebody was a pharmacist, and there were all these kind of stereotypes, tropes that actually played out. My Zeta, he spent his summers in Flin Flon, Manitoba. Do you guys know where Flin Flon, Manitoba is?
I do.
It is so far
never
north
been,
than
but
Winnipeg.
yeah.
Minneapolis is closer to drive to from Winnipeg than Flin Flon. But my Zeta spent his summers there in university working in the mines, making cash as a university student because his sister, my great aunt, she and her husband were some of the Jews in Flin Flon, and he ran a pharmacy. And they lived up there, and like there was a community, like my mom's cousin had his bar mitzvah in Flin Flon. Now there's nothing, right? Like so when Avi, you talk about that time, like that is that coming back? I don't know. Like I just don't see that. I don't see that coming back. I think now if you want to have a Jewish life, you need to be closer to a place that can provide you the things that make a Jewish life. Like what makes it easier to have a Jewish life? A school, access to matzah on Passover. Like it's hard
I was
to do
going to ask
that in
those
Flin Flon.
things because I think that when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about two very different things when it comes to, for example, Orthodox Jews or non-Orthodox Jews.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I'm saying they have very distinct and specific needs. I remember talking to the Chabad rabbi in Surrey, BC, for this piece that I was writing a couple of years ago about small towns in Canada. And it was like, yeah, we have nothing. And you learn that these Chabad families, they don't have Jewish schools there in Surrey, let alone a Chabad school. And they were like decades ahead and were sending their kids to school on Zoom to Crown Heights. And they had these like schools that were exclusively on Zoom with these kids from around the world. So that they can learn, and they manage to figure out their own infrastructure. What do you guys see as the infrastructure that you cannot live without as a Jew, that you think that, well, I mean, as a person, if I had to move there, I guess I would move there. But in order to have a community, what are the things that you think about?
So once I saw the topic for today, I kept thinking about one summer when I was working at camp as like education staff. It was the 350th year since I think the first Jewish community in South America. And so we were celebrating like 350 years of Jews in North America and like thinking about what does a Jewish community need to be a community for people to want to move there and have structure. And that summer, I was koshering meat. That was what I was doing with the kids. And the message takeaway from that was that Jewish communities need a butcher. People want to have access to kosher meat. So they need a butcher and they need a mikveh for ritual immersion for people who keep that, right? And so 300 and something years ago, that was essential. And I can't remember what the third thing. And I went and I asked Claude, and it suggested that communities need a rabbi or a teacher. So we're talking even just about small communities.
Now? Not now.
No, this is historically.
Historically.
But for
yes.
obvious question of what an Orthodox community needs.
Yes.
I think that a lot of that basically still holds true. We have historical knowledge. There are lots and lots of responsa and halachic literature about what a community does in order to ritually function when there are fewer than 10 adult men present, which tells us that for a lot of history, these were
situations
that people lived in these little teeny tiny communities. And by the way, this I just learned sort of recently, in order to live in a place in the pre-modern period, you actually had to have permission to live there. You couldn't just move to a place.
That's wild.
This is one of the things that I learned about the territory, the colonies when in America was
Yes.
that one of the big breakthroughs was that they had a law that said you didn't have to have permission to move here. Anybody who wanted could move here.
Wild.
And that was very vastly different from what was
Totally
going on
revolutionary.
in England. Yeah.
Wild.
Communities sort of once upon a time kept a careful balance that there weren't too many pharmacists and there weren't too many bricklayers, and they would sort of very carefully manage their local economies. So you didn't want too many people who do the same this or do that. And I don't think that this is the case in North America, but historically, you didn't want your town to be overrun by Jews. So one thing that I think is really interesting is that over the last, let's say, 50, 60, 70 years, in our upbringings, and I would say also to some extent our parents' upbringings, we took Jewish infrastructure and Jewish organization for granted. And that allowed all kinds of different kinds of affiliation and disaffiliation from being Jewish. And during that same time period, I would posit that the migration was from the smaller places to the bigger places, right? My mom moved from London, Ontario to Toronto. I moved from Toronto to New York. And people I think are used to normally, right? We're surprised that people are moving to these smaller places with less infrastructure. But one thing that they offer is much more affordable housing, and you can work remotely, and nature is beautiful. And there's all kinds of reasons that a person might prioritize quality of life over Jewish community.
But within a scale, though, right? It all depends on what you're talking about as your needs from the infrastructure. That's where Avi's question was. Your answer historically is interesting to me because now, I mean,
if it's not a priority,
right.
Or you're going to build it yourself, right? Historically, these communities are run by people who are Jewish entrepreneurs, and it's nice to see that there's sort of a push to support that increasingly.
The thing that I learned from this woman who runs the Center for Small Town Jewish Life that's in Colby College in northeastern USA.
Rachel Isaacs?
Yes. Shout out to her.
That was wild.
You don't move to a small town if you are not the type of person that is not going to do the thing that needs to get done. If you walk into Shul the first Shabbat and you say, oh, where's the youth programming? Where's the classes for the kids? They're just running around Shul, and you're not ready to step up yourself and teach that class, you don't belong in a small town, right? The fact that everybody does that, and there's a lot of strength, there's a lot of value to yourself as a Jew that you're actively able to be part of building a community, as opposed to when you live in Toronto, you can just have everything handed to you.
I say this all the time. When I'm in Kelowna especially, it reminds me of Fredericton, Moncton, Halifax, Sydney, where, the people who actually showed up to shul went all the time, and then they moved the tables, and then they made the food. You know, in Winnipeg, I was at a huge shul where there was a chef, where there was a staff. There's no staff at these places. There's no money for a staff at the synagogue in Kelowna. The staff are the volunteers who also help lead Shacharit, who also help put out the books. It's all the same people. It's so when you have that kind of buy-in locally, the feeling is so different. The vibe. I mean, Sherrod Zedek has this long history in Winnipeg where I worked of class and sophistication, and those are all special things in their place, I guess. But what always resonated with me was like what you're describing. You know, if you want something done, you got to pitch in. Like that's the mentality. You know, in a bigger city, you have the opportunity to say, okay, I'll pay my dues. I'm part of this bigger machine. I can send my kids to the school that are affiliated, the camp that are affiliated, and it's easier. The access is really close, but maybe I'm one of, the pond is a lot bigger.
I think there's something interesting about the fact that the things that we're talking about now point to me that like there is a level of sophistication to Jewish infrastructure that has developed over the past, let's say, half century. And with that level of sophistication comes this notion that you have a harder time living without it. So 50 years ago, you didn't need access to an all kosher supermarket with tons of all these products because not a lot of products needed to be kosher because they were inherently believed to be kosher and they were on a list. And you didn't
or they
need,
had
there
more
was
recognizable ingredients,
or you had, or you just made more stuff at home. So the fact that like everything is now kosher and kosher available makes people who live in a place without access to a major kosher grocery miss out on that. The fact that mikvahs are now spas basically and are super sophisticated and are ultra luxe and plush makes people who have a Spartan mikvah, but it does the job, feel bad that they don't have access to these massive like spa-like mikvahs. You know, as you get more sophisticated, you know, you feel the need to have this. And a lot of people are saying, you know what, I can opt out. I don't need those things. I can move to a small town and I will still have a rich Jewish life because Amazon can send me the books and the menorahs and the other things that I need. And I'm not the kind of person that needs all of the latest.
But that's just home. Like you're creating a life that's just home based, right? Like if anyone I've talked to, even if they're older, who grew up in a small town,
I think you need a community. I think you need, even if it's a small community,
all the
but you need a
people
community.
I've talked to, right? Like all the people who ultimately ended up in Winnipeg, from Moose Jaw and Melville and Regina and Flin Flon and Thunder Bay, like everyone, right? They always went somewhere where there were more Jews. The number of Jews was a key factor, and not just because of what I think that led to as a secondary thing, like now there's a school, now there's more shuls, now there's a camp, now there's two camps, whatever. And I think that in the last couple of years, in our now post-October 7th world, that's a thing that makes people feel safer, is a little bit more, as one of my friends in Kelowna put it, Jewish density. Right? You live in a neighborhood with a lot of Jews, you fear less. You feel like you're more banded together, potentially. And in these smaller communities, there's fewer of you. You're on your own, and you feel farther away from the arm of Vancouver. Right? Like as great as this is, if you need help, whatever that looks like, from Vancouver to Kelowna, from Vancouver to Prince George, like I don't know where their communities are. I can only kind of guess, but. Like, how quickly does it get there? I mean, when we were in Halifax and we were talking about it's hard. Like, when you've got a few hundred Jews here and a few hundred Jews there, it's hard to who helps keep it organized? Who helps when you need help?
Well, so that's, I think, where the initiative, especially in British Columbia, it's more than a rebrand. It's a like revision of what the Federation is, right? It's not just for Vancouver. It's for all of British Columbia. And it's intentionally providing these networks for these small communities. And there's like a million, right? So first of all, I think there's like an economy of scale, right? That like you're designing a program or you're helping to facilitate, right? The technology allows these different communities to support each other in new and different ways than before. And the Federation of British Columbia brought them all together. And that was really enriching, it sounds like, for the representatives from these different communities, both because they feel less isolated and they can brainstorm together and be enriched by other people's experiences and insights. And it seems increasingly like there's this awareness that these small, teeny tiny little Jewish communities historically are a very important part of the fabric of Canadian Jewish history in ways that like haven't been fully explored or appreciated because there's such an outsized focus on Toronto and Montreal, and I think even Winnipeg.
You think?
But it's interesting, right? Like one thing that Karen Collins pointed out is that these smaller communities, like, and even the Winnipeg-sized communities can have a really hard time drawing leadership. Rabbis from the States, from all over, don't necessarily want to move.
You don't have to be so diplomatic. They don't want to move. It's the same.
Right. They don't want to. They don't want to move.
It's the same problem the Jets have in the NHL.
Problem.
You're paying guys you're playing hockey players millions of dollars. Winnipeg is last on their list.
But it's not just But it's not just Winnipeg. Like
but
lots
the draw is very difficult. It's a reality.
100%. And London, and even in Nashville, it's hard to get rabbis to move there with their families.
Even
and
in
the
Nashville?
smaller the community, the harder it is. Yes, even. So
it seemed to me to be like a draw. Anyway,
maybe you want to go to Nashville.
No, I love Winnipeg. I love living in Winnipeg.
You do love Winnipeg.
I think a lot of the people who live in that's what's funny when you talk about these smaller communities. When you're a community that's like a Winnipeg or a Nashville, and you've got more options that give you access to the things that allow you to be actively Jewish, like do Jewish things,
right?
As opposed to just like what you were saying, Avi, like order on Amazon and have stuff sent to you. And your home could be incredibly active, but I mean, when you've got other Jews around you and the places where you can send your kids and the places where you can celebrate holidays, I think when it's not Toronto and Montreal and it's not New York, then you can find this balance of where it is a little bit more affordable, and those middle powers, I think, but smaller than that is a totally different.
And that's where
game.
the growth is. And
because like there's levels, right? Like middle, like the smaller ones, like the Halifaxes or the Kelownas. Or
what I love about the times that I've visited smaller towns, smaller communities, is that the communities that gather around the shuls, they know that this is who we are. This is what we gotta. These are our friends. This is what we gotta do. We gotta build with what we have, and you end up with great communities. So Shabbat ends up being with those people. You go to shul with those people. You have kiddush with those people. You often have these people over in the afternoon or for Friday night dinner, and that becomes your community. And you don't have to. You don't have to say to yourself, well, I don't know anybody. You get a built-in community. It's the antidote to like Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, or that whole culture of aloneness. And you don't have the luxury of being able to say, I don't like this person, and so I'm not going to hang out with this person, or I don't like that person, or there's enough people that I'm going to go to the early minyan and not the late minyan. Everybody's in it like that. And I love that for communities that say, this is who we are, young, old, married, single, whatever it is. We ended up in, Abbotsford, and then we were basically like, this is our community. This is our Shabbat people. This is how we do it. And that builds a community in a very meaningful and powerful way. And that's great. So that there is something about that you actually don't get. You can easily get lost in a big city. I was at a big shul in Miami a week and a half ago for Shabbat. And I got to say, there was 5 minyanim, and I walked into, one of the big ones, and I spent the whole Shabbat there, and I went into the Kiddush, and nobody said Good Shabbos to me, right? Because they have their friends, they have their people, and like...
Because you don't really look that Jewish, so they weren't sure if you were like...
Oh, I don't know.
They should even say hello to somebody who's not Jewish.
No one said anything to you?
I had a couple of literally just Good Shabbos, shake hands, move on. There was no, are you visiting, who you, what?
That's what I'm talking about. The vibe, like what you need is that small town Hamish vibe, but still with a lot of people. Like that's the places that have that, the synagogues that claim to have that is a secret sauce. That is something special, because like that vibe, there's no replacing that closeness. That's really what community is, right? I always wonder, if you live in a small place like Abbotsford and you have a family. Now that I have kids, I wonder, like, where are they going to meet other Jewish kids? Where do they go?
The
like
internet,
on the streets of New York,
college.
Between now and college.
Summer camp.
Summer camp is a huge, and I think one of the things that's cool is that in a place like, again, Kelowna, or in places like Alberta, there's kind of one camp. And that's an opportunity often to, or in Camp Kadima's, the camp out east in Halifax, that is often an opportunity where there isn't a school or there isn't a community center to bring, it's like bringing young people together. You know, forget the adults, they'll figure it out for themselves, like you said, through their jobs and their routines and everything. But for young people to even just meet other, my parents were big in, like my mom especially, BBYO, and they would go on these trips. I don't know if that goes in cycles. I don't know if it's big again in Winnipeg, but during the summer, camp is big. And I think if you lived in a small town and met kids from other towns like nearby who were Jewish during the summer, that could be really advantageous, I think, to building connections for young people.
I think that there's something beautiful about people moving to places and building the thing in their vision. And it obviously isn't my choice. And the calculus, as Avi said, for Orthodox Jews who want and need a Shabbat community within, 2-3 miles of a shul is different. It's just a different equation. But there are so many different ways to be Jewish. And I want to, one of the texts that keeps resonating for me in this conversation is from sort of the paragraphs at the end of Shachrit on Shabbat, sort of moving towards the Musaf service. And it says that whoever...
It's the shout out to all the people who make the community.
Yeah. And it says, may the Holy One give all of the people who are, toiling for the community and working hard to make the community happen, may he remove from them any illness, grant them complete healing, and forgive all their sins. But there's this explicit recognition and prayer for and blessing all the people who build the community. And, there's upside and downside. I think you can sometimes tell who has had parents who are the doers, right? Like growing up, my dad was the guy who went to shul Erev Shabbat and put the hot water on and put the cholent in the oven. And it makes a big impression. And I'm, very happy for somebody else to do that, but I contribute to my community in different ways. And just the intentionality required. And it's not just about money, it's about sweat equity and time and dedication. And good for all these people in these small communities who are sort of building what they want and what they need, and they have to do it for themselves. So shout out from Shachrit on Shabbat.
There you go. It is important to note that one of the things that I think is really positive that I learned from the Karen Collins article was that there are organizations now that are looking to foster more of this and more of the leadership in these small communities, specifically in Canada. And so, more power to them. And we should be dedicating that bracha to those people, even though they live in big cities. All right, let's move on to textual healing for the week.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing. Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Parshat Korach, the rebellion, right? It's like the Empire Strikes Back, the Force Awakens, the Parshat Korach, the rebellion. I don't know who's going to get it. Somebody rescue me here.
Okay, I'll jump in. What I was talking about is that they're in the wilderness, and this guy named Korach kind of leads a rebellion with a couple of other dudes, Datan and Aviram, and 250-ish men against Moses. Right? He challenges Moses' leadership. And it's a lot of why are you the leader? Why do you think you're so much better than us? Why do you think you're so holy? We should be leading us. You're not doing such a good job. You stink. We're going to take over. Just so that you all read it. No spoilers. It doesn't end great for him. And Moses obviously gets to keep on leading. But right off the top, this is an age-old problem. Korach, the rabbis call him and his argument machloket lo l'shem shamayim. Right? They draw this distinction, an argument not for the sake of heaven. And they say there's this other kind of argument, machloket lishem shamayim. And an argument for the sake of heaven, Hillel versus Shammai. Hillel trounced Shammai every single time. Like, the record was like basically 99-1, 100-0. Like, it was one of the worst beatdowns ever. But Hillel used to teach Shammai's reasonings and talk about them, and they always had good faith, and they were always just trying to get to truth and to try to find the answer. Korach went after Moses because of Korach. Not because of any kind of truth. He went after Moses because of Korach's own insecurities, his jealousy. So I just wonder how many times, without our even realizing it, each of us daily gets caught in an argument that's a little too Korach in our lives. And I'm not saying that it's going to end in the ground opening up and swallowing you up, but it's going to swallow you up somehow. Like, you don't come out. You don't come out for the better when an argument's not for the sake of heaven. I've seen this play out. Like, I've had Korachs in my life. I like to think that I was the Moses in those situations. I pray to God because I tried to fall on my face and do all the things. Like Moses, that's the other thing, quickly. The way Moses handles himself in the story is very admirable because he gets challenged. It's a lesson also on what to do when someone goes after you. Like when someone bullies you, when someone attacks you. Like at the end of the story, Moses tries to meet with these guys. They won't even come out of their tent. Like he tried. He's just a guy. Mm-hmm. You know, the whole story to me feels just very, very real. So go read it, folks. Go read it. Anyway.
All right. Dita, what do you have for us?
Yeah,
I do feel like maybe this is the year that the story resonates more for me.
Oh.
Maybe like having a better, more meaningful engagement with Sefer Bamidbar, with numbers than historically. So maybe that's Matthew's influence. At the beginning of this story, when the group of rebels comes to Moshe, and he has to respond to them, right? Like they're saying, you've taken too much power, right? Some of the commentaries explain that the problem is that Moshe has appointed Aaron to be the high priest, and that like you can't have both the leadership. And it's interesting that the Midrashim call it kingship and the priesthood, like one or the other. That's the problem. Anyway, but Moshe knows, obviously, that like this was God, right? Like God has appointed him to be the leader of the Israelites, and God also has appointed his brother to be the priest. And then in chapter 16, verse 4, it says, so Moshe hears this, and Vayipol al panav, he falls on his face. And I think I have always read that as like, again, and like this like frustration of like, are we really doing this again? And Rashi there explains that that's actually not what's happening, that this is now the fourth time that the people have rebelled against God. There was the golden calf and the incident with the spies, and I'm not going to get the fourth. I'm bad whenever there's a number like that.
Was it not the food?
Yes, it was indeed the food. Thank you, Bobby. And so that the problem now is not that like Moshe is frustrated with the people, but that Moshe is worried that God is not going to let Moshe pray and achieve forgiveness for them. That Moshe's concern is that his advocacy is not going to be effective this fourth time. And that's actually what he's worried about. Huh. So
that he's kind of run out of juice, huh?
That God is just going to be like, Moshe, this is the fourth time. Enough, right? Like the Midrash like likens it to the exasperated parent, right? Like really? Did you really just mark up the wall with magic marker again? Right? Like not quite the same scale, but like when kids keep doing the same thing over and over again, the first few times that like, you take a deep breath and you don't get so upset and you just say like, please don't do that again. But like, it's been enough times now.
It's super interesting because to me that kind of foreshadows that he soon, is it next week? Right? Isn't it Chukat where he loses it and he smacks the rock? Mm-hmm. Poor man.
Yeah.
Love Moses.
On that note, I'm going to point out that there are commentaries, especially in the Hasidic world, that say that maybe Moshe may have mishandled this entire situation. I found this line from the Jose of Lublin, who was a 19th century Hasidic leader, who said that were he alive at the time, he would have supported Korach.
What?
People want holiness. People want access. And who are you to stop people from being more holy, from wanting to get closer to God? And there's this amazing piece of Talmud that points out a serious mistake that Moshe makes when he loses it. And he basically tells them, right? What does he say? He tells them, Rav lachem, right? You have enough. And the same words are the words that God uses to Moshe when God tells him you're not entering the land, right? He basically says, Rav lach, you have enough in here, right? In the desert, you're not going into the land. And it's sort of this pointed rebuke, right? You want more holiness, but you try to prevent somebody else from having more holiness, and that's not how you do things.
Oh, no. I don't know.
All right, Matthew, not down for the Hasidic reading.
I mean, like, that one made me think for a second. I just always thought that Korach was the evil, obvious. You even started off by.
I'm not saying that he's great, but he may have had a good point, right? There's some I
think he could have gone about it in a better way. I think
that's
Korach
what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. He could maybe. I think the lesson might be if you have a good point, make sure how you deliver it. Because
it's the wrong critique to go to somebody and say, "Don't you have enough holiness?"
Gentlemen,
share the wealth.
Speaking of leadership and power, today is the DC mayoral election.
Whoa.
So I need to go vote, guys.
Great week. See you all next week. See you soon. Have a good one.
Bye, team.
Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.